My name is Isla Bennett, 32 years old, a literature teacher in a small town in northern Oregon. I used to think the greatest shock of my life was the day my parents died in a car accident. Until that morning, when I had just found out I was pregnant with a baby boy, and at the same time overheard my husband whispering to my cousin in the clinic hallway, "She's starting to suspect. You need to be more careful." My body went still, the ultrasound photo trembling in my hand as if it could shield me from what I had just heard. And them? They were discussing how to hide a child. That wasn't mine. Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to realize you were the only one left in the dark? Leave a comment if you've ever felt that way. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so we can continue this story, where betrayal doesn't come from strangers, but from those you once called family. I lost my parents at the age of 25 in a horrific traffic accident. At the time, Harper was 17, my maternal cousin, but I had always treated her like my own sister. After Harper's mother passed away, she mostly lived with her grandmother and would stay with me every summer. But after the accident took my parents, who were also Harper's legal guardians, I did the only thing I thought was right. I brought her home to live with me permanently. I didn't overthink it. I was numb with grief, but I still signed every paper to become Harper's legal guardian. Partly because of love and partly because I needed something to hold on to keep from falling apart. I used to think if I couldn't be someone's daughter anymore, at least I could try to be a good sister. Harper lived with me through the rest of her high school years, then went off to college. She was smart, bold, and had a way of making people soften around her. When I was buried under waves of silent depression after the loss, the one who pulled me out wasn't anyone else but Ethan. Ethan was a civil engineer, calm, patient, and a listener rather than a talker. He didn't comfort me with empty promises, but with his steady presence, every single day. On nights when I couldn't eat a single bite, he cooked. When I cried because the memories came rushing back, he didn't try to fix it. He just sat with me. We were together for 4 years before we got married. It wasn't love at first sight, but something that grew quietly, like trees after a wildfire. I loved Ethan not because he was flashy, but because with him I was allowed to be fragile. After the wedding, it was Ethan who suggested that Harper move back into our home. "That day," he said, "she was there for you during your hardest times. Now she just called off her engagement. Must be a mess. I think if we let her stay here for a while, at least she won't feel completely alone." I was a little surprised, since Ethan had never gotten involved in Harper's personal life before. But it made sense. Harper had called off the wedding just 3 weeks before the ceremony. She told me. He changed. At first he was sweet, but the closer we got to the wedding, the more he controlled everything. I couldn't breathe. I was scared I'd spend my whole life shrinking next to someone who made me feel smaller every morning I woke up. I believed her. I defended her to our friends, even said, "A woman who has the courage to stop before stepping into the wrong marriage is brave, not weak." Ethan nodded quietly when I said that. Harper hugged me tight the day she moved in, her eyes red but her mouth trying to smile. Back then, I didn't know. The loneliness they spoke of was being filled in the cruelest way, and I, with all my good intentions, had opened the door and let it walk into our home. I didn't confront them right after that ultrasound appointment. In fact, on the drive home, when Gavin was rambling about baby names, nursery paint colors, whether to teach the boy basketball or baseball, I just sat quietly, nodded when I needed to, smiled on cue. I needed time to zoom out and see the whole con, to understand what was truly going on, and more importantly, to know exactly who I was dealing with. I started by hiring a private attorney, someone completely unrelated to the joint estate firm Ethan and I used to work with. Her name was Danielle Shu, a sharp woman in her early 40s, with a voice like cold steel. "You don't have to answer the big question yet," she said during our very first meeting. "Whether or not you'll file for divorce. The first thing is knowing exactly where you stand." I handed her everything: the mortgage agreement, our bank records, investment statements, loan documents, even what I thought were small things like the joint savings account we had opened in preparation for the baby. Just 3 days later, Danielle came back with a question that sent a chill down my spine. "Did you know your husband recently transferred ownership of your current home to someone else?" I went numb. "To who?" Danielle turned her laptop screen toward me. The name was right there on the Lane County Property Registry. Harper Monroe. The house I had helped choose, brick by brick for the kitchen, the paint for the living room, the lavender pots on the porch, was now in my cousin's name. I asked Danielle what I already suspected but needed someone to say aloud. This is asset evasion, isn't it? And if he did this while the marriage was already showing signs of distress, without a clear prenuptial agreement, then yes, this can be considered a fraudulent transfer in anticipation of divorce. But I'll need more evidence. I remember sitting in my car for a long time after leaving her office. One hand on my belly, my baby kicked gently, as if reminding me I wasn't allowed to fall apart. Not now. From that day on, I began playing my part to perfection. I didn't check Ethan's phone, didn't ask questions, didn't let my eyes betray me. I still smiled when Harper made mint tea and asked if I wanted lemon. I still said goodnight when Ethan pulled the blanket over me each evening. But inside, I was collecting every crumb. I hired a private investigator, not the kind with a fedora like in old movies, but a meticulous, discreet woman who used to be a tax fraud examiner. In less than 2 weeks she handed me a file, and on the very first page was the thing that made me want to throw up right there. Harper had gone for a prenatal exam at a private clinic nearly 2 hours away, and the paperwork listed her name as Harper Monroe. Marital status, single, with no father listed on the birth certificate. Not only that, she had used a temporary rental address in the apartment complex where Ethan had supposedly been on extended work assignments. And one small but legally critical detail. Harper had already pre-registered her delivery as a single mother at a completely different hospital from the one where I was scheduled to give birth. I held that file, my hand trembling. She hadn't just betrayed me. She was planning to erase me entirely from the picture. To turn me into a stranger to the child my husband had fathered with my own cousin. I gave all the documents to Danielle. She was silent for a moment, then said, "There's one more thing you need to see." She opened her laptop, typed a few lines, and turned the screen to me. A copy of the employee benefits policy from Ethan's company. Under the dependent section, recently updated 3 months ago. Harper Monroe, living dependent. Stared at those words. He hadn't just lied to me. He had lied to his workplace too by listing a dependent as if he were supporting a non-working family member. This violated the company's internal ethics policy. The same company that once declared, "Employees' families come first." I leaned back in my chair, my head spinning. Danielle closed the laptop. "You don't have to decide anything today," she said softly. "But you have the upper hand now. And I promise if you choose to walk away, you won't walk away empty-handed." I thanked her, stood up and walked to my car. The winter sky was gray. Snow dotted the top of my windshield. I sat there, the engine off, one hand on my belly. "Lucas," I whispered, "you're about to see the world for what it really is. But I promise, I won't let you grow up in lies." I once read somewhere that the worst kind of betrayal doesn't come from an enemy. It comes from someone you trusted enough to sleep beside. I no longer trusted sleep. In the weeks after I uncovered everything, I started staying awake until nearly morning. Not doing anything in particular, just unable to stop my mind. During the day, I was Isla, just as everyone knew me. Still 6 months pregnant, still smiling politely at neighbors when they asked, still posting dinner photos with Ethan, with captions like, "Someone's very excited to meet our little boy." But at night, Ethan would wrap his arms around me as we got into bed. He'd rest his hand on my belly and whisper, "We're going to be a beautiful family, you know that?" I wanted to scream the moment he said it. A family? With how many children? From how many women? I had to keep my shoulders from shaking, keep my breathing steady. Ethan suspected nothing. Maybe he truly thought I was stupid. And Harper? She carried on like nothing ever happened. Still woke up early to make coffee, still laid out muffins on the table for me. One day she knocked on my door when I was too tired to get up, holding out a plate of warm cinnamon waffles and said, "You need to eat more, sis, baby needs energy." She called me sis as if she hadn't heard me say my baby's name in that clinic hallway, as if she didn't know I had heard it all. I once walked into the kitchen and saw Harper peeling a pear, humming along to a soft country tune, wearing rubber gloves like someone preparing to be the perfect nanny. I'm thinking of getting some non-slip rugs for the nursery, Harper said when she noticed me standing in the doorway. It's going to get lots of sunlight. I even found some cute decor pieces on Etsy. My throat tightened every time she mentioned the baby. Vague, never saying which baby. Sometimes I'd walk into the nursery, stand in the middle of those half-painted walls, place my hand on my belly, and whisper, "We're not alone. We know the truth." Lucas kicked hard as if answering me, and I burst into tears right there in that unfinished room, among the unopened swaddle blankets, surrounded by emotions I couldn't explain to anyone. I didn't tell my friends, not my mom, not my coworkers. I was afraid that if I said it out loud, if anyone truly listened, I would collapse completely. I went to prenatal appointments alone. At the last one, when the doctor said, "He's developing really well, great reflexes," I smiled, but my eyes stung. Reflexes, healthy, the only thing in my life still intact. On the nights I couldn't sleep, I'd sit in the rocking chair Ethan had assembled for me, curling up in the living room. I'd run my fingers over the framed ultrasound photo, remembering the first time I saw Lucas, a tiny silhouette, turning, stretching out his arms. When the screen lit up with his nose, spine, and beating heart, I had imagined Ethan next to me, holding my hand. I imagined him emotional. I even said, "This little boy is going to be your perfect twin." At that moment, Ethan was kissing someone else, lying to me, signing property papers under Harper's name. I thought I was losing my mind. I started having strange dreams, being trapped inside my own home, seeing Harper holding my baby, seeing Ethan smiling at me through the window while I screamed and no one could hear. I'd wake up, face damp, breathing hard, and go make ginger tea. I needed something to keep myself from falling apart. One night, while I was peeling an apple in the kitchen, Ethan came in and wrapped his arms around me from behind like he hadn't done anything wrong. "Lucas is going to look like you," he whispered. "Bright eyes, dimples, and he'll be a mama's boy for sure." I turned, gave a soft smile, then faked a wave of nausea to pull away from him. I no longer knew what feelings were real. I only knew I couldn't collapse. Not when my baby was growing every day. Not when I was about to bring the entire truth into the light. The best mask wearers aren't out there. They lie next to you every night, whispering promises about a perfect family. I knew that better than anyone. What I felt wasn't just hurt or rage anymore. It was a terrifying clarity. Once you've seen someone's true face, you can't unsee it. I began preparing. The first step was opening a separate bank account under my maiden name, Isla Merritt. I left all related documents in a safe deposit box at the bank. No traces on emails, phones, or any statements Ethan could access. Next, I created an anonymous email address. With discreet help from Danielle the lawyer, I compiled a brief report, including evidence of Ethan's ethical violations at work. Everything written in cold, objective language. Proof of falsely declaring a dependent, Harper, to receive increased benefits. Transferring personal assets into the name of his wife's cousin during an active marriage. Using the company's mailing address to receive private correspondence between them. I hit send on a Tuesday morning. No name, no reply needed. I wasn't after vengeance, only the quiet spark that would bring the truth into the open. Then, I wrote a handwritten letter, cream-colored stationery, sloppily scrawled on purpose, enough to mimic Ethan's handwriting after a few drinks. "Harper, I know things are more complicated than I thought, but I've made up my mind. After the baby shower, I'll tell Isla everything. I owe you that. You and the baby deserve a fresh start, openly. Don't doubt how I feel. I've never been more sure." I tucked the letter into the book Harper was reading, letting a corner stick out. Just enough to make her feel like she was the only one holding this secret. A few days later, Harper started smiling more. She'd fix her hair in the kitchen mirror. Wear more fitted dresses when going out. One afternoon, as I was lying on my side on the sofa, she sat down next to me and gently stroked my belly like she was touching a shared investment for both of them. "What do you think about the two babies growing up together, going to the same school, sharing the same birthday?" I turned toward her and smiled so softly that even I was startled by my own ability. "Sounds like a dream," I said. After that, I started planning the baby shower. I decided to host it at home, the same place where Ethan and I once held our engagement party. I invited mutual friends, neighbors, even Harper's former co-workers, the ones who had seen her trying on that white dress for the wedding that never happened last year. I hand-wrote the invitations, each with a note, a warm afternoon to welcome a little angel, and the things that were never said aloud. Harper helped me choose the tablecloths, the cake, the decorative pillows. I let her handle everything, from suggesting the menu to reminding me to confirm with guests. A week before the party, I installed 2 hidden cameras, one in the corner of the living room ceiling, and another inside a family photo frame on the bookshelf. Both had clear audio. I also reached out to an old acquaintance who used to work as a video editor at a local studio. He helped me set up a slideshow of ultrasound images and a short clip that intertwined happy home snapshots with the pieces I had prepared. Every night, while Ethan slept soundly, I sat alone in the living room editing that clip, frame by frame, cut by cut. My hands shook, my eyes burned, but nothing in my life had ever made me feel more awake than those moments. The night before the party, Harper knocked on my door with a small bottle of essential oil in hand. "I brought some lavender to help you sleep." I thanked her, took it, and slowly closed the door behind her. I didn't sleep that night. I sat up, placed my hand on my belly, and watched the warm light cast shadows across the wall where I once sketched out baby name ideas. Tomorrow morning I would no longer be Isla Bennett, the devoted wife and caring sister. I would return to being myself, and the truth would speak for itself. That day, the weather was gently sunny. A spring breeze drifted through the porch, making the ribbon streamers at the door sway softly. On the table sat a custom 3-tier cake, decorated with tiny baby blue booties, and a carefully piped message. "Welcome, Lucas. The greatest gift." I wore a long ivory dress, tied my hair loosely to one side, and put on rosewood lipstick. I wanted to look peaceful, not to prove anything to anyone, but to remind myself that I was the only person in that house not living a lie. Friends began arriving, some I hadn't seen since the wedding or since the school's year-end party, or the day I invited them over to plant lavender in the backyard. Everyone brought gifts, pastries, flowers, and sweet well-wishes. Ethan stood beside me, hand gently on my back, wearing his usual polite smile. He introduced me as the mother of the most wonderful little boy we're about to meet. Harper, on the other hand, was unusually radiant. She wore a pastel pink dress, trendy flats, and her cheeks had a natural glow like they'd been carefully made up. She beamed when mutual friends came up to hug her. A few of Harper's old friends hesitated before asking, "How have you been lately? Heard you moved out of town." "I'm looking for stability, and I'm finally about to have it." I heard it all, every word, every look, but I didn't interrupt. After the light refreshments, I stepped to the center of the room, lifted a glass of pomegranate juice, and gently tapped it once. The room gradually fell silent. I spoke in an even, calm tone. "Thank you all for being here today. Honestly, I could never have imagined the journey into motherhood would begin with so many surprises. And I'd like to share something special with you all." I signaled for Ethan to start the projector. He nodded, unaware that the USB I'd inserted wasn't the slideshow Harper helped me pick out a few days ago. The soft lights dimmed. The large screen lit up with the ultrasound image of the first time I saw Lucas. His round head, his fast-beating heart. The room let out an emotional, "Ah!" And then a voice played. "You're starting to suspect. You need to be more careful." It was Ethan's voice. I heard a small clatter behind me. Someone had dropped a plastic cup onto the carpet. "Don't worry, she thinks you're the perfect sister. She won't suspect a thing," Harper responded. A series of whispers, followed by soft laughter. Then came, "Once the baby's born, I'll say he's from my ex. She'll never know." I didn't look at Ethan or Harper. I just stood tall, both hands on my belly, eyes fixed on the screen, like I was merely a witness, not the main character in the tragedy unfolding. Ethan's voice came one last time, quiet but clear. "She trusts too easily. I know how to keep her quiet." The screen went black. The lights came back on. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face twitched. His hands clenched, like he was trying to hold something inside that was already breaking. I spoke, slowly, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "You're the father of the child growing inside me?" I took a breath. A light cramp passed through my belly, making me flinch slightly. But I didn't step back. "And also the father of another child, with someone I once called family." I turned toward Harper. Her face had gone pale, her lips trembled, her eyes widened in disbelief. I thought, he told me," Harper stammered. I raised my hand, gently, but firmly enough to silence her. "No need to explain, everyone here has heard enough." Ethan stepped forward. "Isla, you're misunderstanding, I can explain." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Explain? What part? That my cousin is pregnant with your child, that you told her I was a fool who trusted too easily? Or the part where you planned to transfer assets and cut me out?" Ethan's lips tightened. He looked around. No one stood with him. One mutual friend stepped back. A neighbor whispered to her husband. One of my co-workers set down her drink and crossed her arms. Harper burst into tears. She ran out of the living room, her shoes screeching against the hardwood floor. No one followed her. Ethan looked at me one last time, lips moving as if trying to speak. But there were no words strong enough to save him from what he himself had said. Just 3 days after the party, Ethan was suspended from work pending an internal investigation. I don't know exactly how much they discovered, but I suspect they received that email from the anonymous sender I had written weeks earlier. When HR called him in, Ethan came home looking stunned, his face ashen, unable to explain clearly. He just kept saying, "They told me to take time off, must be some misunderstanding." I didn't reply. I simply poured myself more tea, then carefully filed away the divorce papers I had already filled out on my end. And Harper, she disappeared just 2 days after being exposed. No goodbye, no explanation. I only noticed her usual suitcase was gone from the closet, and several of her cosmetics had vanished from the vanity. On the kitchen table was a hastily written note in black ink. "I'm sorry for everything. I can't stay here. H." That was it. No new phone number, no address, nothing left behind with clarity. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even angry. The small town quickly buzzed with what happened that day. Someone had recorded part of the video from the presentation, without sound, and shared it in the local Facebook group. The caption was simple: "Some truths don't need to be shouted." After that, I didn't leave the house for a few days, not because I was afraid, but because my body was growing tired. I was now 7 months pregnant, and every movement felt like I was dragging a boulder around. Strangely, though, I felt lighter than ever. I scheduled another meeting with my lawyer Danielle and officially filed for divorce. "How do you want to proceed?" she asked. "We can petition for a full asset reassessment, and there's grounds for a separate lawsuit regarding financial misconduct." I looked out her office window. The trees outside were budding with fresh leaves. It was still cold, but the light had changed. "I don't want to get pulled into that swamp," I said slowly. "I just want full custody of the child, and I want to end every tie as quickly as possible." Danielle frowned. "If you forego the assets, he'll have a major advantage." "Maybe," I sighed, "but he'll never have what I do, the truth." Danielle was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Then we'll keep it clean, but I'll still include clauses regarding visitation rights. We won't let him slip through the cracks and come back demanding shared custody the moment you've found your balance." I knew I was putting a lot of faith in the legal system, but I didn't have a better option, and I had nothing left to regret. Ethan tried to reach out afterward. The first message came on the second night after the divorce papers were filed. "I know you're angry, but please, don't cut me out of the child's life." I didn't respond. 3 days later, he sent a nearly 2-page email, reminiscing about the past, praising me as a good wife, saying he lost his way under pressure. I read all of it. Not because I wanted an apology, but because I wanted to see how many flowery words a man could write without ever once using the word responsibility. And sure enough, he never did. Then came the flowers. A bouquet of white carnations. The kind I once said I hated. But he always forgot. Then one afternoon, as I was reading in the living room, I heard a car stop at the gate. Ethan. shirt wrinkled, holding a paper bag of baby items. "I just want to talk," he said when I stepped outside, "just for a few minutes." I didn't open the gate. I stood behind the iron bars, hand on my belly. "Lucas is listening," I said softly. "And I don't want him to learn forgiveness that comes too easily. I'll start over. I'm willing to go to therapy. I'm willing to move. If you want me gone, I'll go. But please, don't make me disappear from his life." I looked at him, this man who once was my anchor, now the deepest crack in my life. "I'm not making you disappear," I said. "I'm forcing you to step into the role you shattered. Being a father isn't about holding a baby on day one and vanishing the rest of their life. You want to be a father? Go to court. File a petition. Prove you deserve it." Ethan said nothing. He placed the paper bag on the steps and walked away in silence. I watched his back, his gait no longer confident, no longer cocky. But I didn't feel satisfied. I just felt calm. A slow, settling calm, like spring wind rustling through trees after a brutal storm. I wrote that letter on an afternoon when the wind had shifted, and the golden hour sunlight slanted through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Not because I had anything left to say to Harper, but because there were still too many feelings inside me that had never been named. I took a sheet of ivory stationery, the same kind I once used for wedding thank you notes. I poured myself a cup of peppermint tea, sat in the old wooden chair, belly heavy, back sore. I started writing without drafting, no edits, just letting the words flow as they came. To the one who once lived beside me. No Harper. No you. No she. I didn't want to address her with any word that had ever held meaning. Because the deepest betrayals don't always come from enemies. They come from the one who slept in your house, knocked on your door to borrow your lipstick and whispered, "You're the only family I have." I'm not writing this letter to accuse you. I'm writing to remind myself of the things I once believed. I used to think I could carry the world on my back as long as family was beside me. I used to think I was strong, because I pulled you out of toxic relationships, out of the panic after your mother died. But maybe I was wrong. I didn't save you. I just opened the door for you to step in, and never thought I'd need to lock it behind you. I remembered every moment I once thought was ordinary, the nights the three of us watched movies in the living room, me resting my head on Ethan's thigh, Harper hugging a long pillow, laughing out loud at the funny scenes. Now, thinking back, I don't know why I remember the way she looked at Ethan. Not longingly, not romantically, but the look of someone trying on a role in a play that wasn't hers. I used to think I was lucky that I could be a wife, a sister, and a friend all at once. But in the end, I lost all those roles. Because I let my guard down around the one person I never expected. I paused, my hand trembling slightly. Lucas kicked lightly at my side, like pulling me back. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "I'm okay." Then I continued writing. "I once hoped you'd be by my side when I gave birth. I pictured you cutting the cake at the baby shower. I thought my child would call you aunt, but instead, you chose to turn it all into a substitution. You didn't take Ethan out of love. You took him the way a lost soul clings to someone else's life, hoping to exist by copying it. I'm not sure if Harper ever saw it that way. Maybe she really thought she was in love. Maybe she thought Ethan would choose her, as some kind of fair ending to a game of conquest. But real love is never built on someone else's back. I'm not angry at you anymore. Anger is a powerful emotion, and I don't want to give that power to you. I'm tired. And that tiredness doesn't make me weak. It makes things clearer. You didn't steal my husband. Ethan isn't a possession. He chose you, like a coward choosing a dark alley over facing the truth. And you accepted the supporting role, hoping one day it would make you the lead. I paused, pulled a tissue, dabbed at the corner of my eye, not exactly crying, just a sting. Light, not quite pain, but not something I could ignore. I didn't write this letter to send it. I just needed to write it, to remember that I once believed, once loved, once lost, and I survived. At the end of the letter, I didn't sign my name. I folded the paper, slipped it into a blank envelope unsealed. Then placed it inside a wooden box next to old journals, where I kept the things that once mattered. I stood up, washed my hands under cold water. That feeling of wholeness slowly returned with each motion. I looked at myself in the kitchen mirror, slightly swollen eyes, loose hair, belly round like an August moon. I no longer needed Harper to call me sister or Ethan to call me wife. I just needed to be Lucas's mother, and to live without having to define myself by pain. I moved to the outskirts of Seattle on a soft rainy day. The new apartment wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms and a small balcony facing Pinecrest Lake, where the morning sunlight shimmered across the water like broken glass. I rented it from an old friend of my father's, a retired professor who lived downstairs, gentle and quiet, growing basil in repurposed tin buckets. I didn't bring much, just a few suitcases, the rocking chair I had spent countless sleepless nights in, the white wooden crib, and the framed ultrasound of my son. The apartment smelled of fresh paint with high ceilings, laminate floors, and an olive green accent wall in the master bedroom. It didn't feel like home right away, but to me it was a place where no one had ever lied. No one had ever betrayed, and that was enough. I gave birth to Silas on an early summer afternoon, while I was rearranging books on the shelf and the contractions began. My mother once told me that my grandfather, the one I never got to meet, was the first man who taught her the difference between living kindly and living to please. I grew up with stories about him. A deep voice, a towel draped over his shoulder while fixing pipes, and a habit of nodding twice when he agreed with something. I named my son Silas James Bennett. James for my grandfather. Silas was a name I had held on to from the days I used to daydream and write it on the covers of notebooks. A name that felt calm, steady. When I held him for the first time, skin wrinkled, breath uneven, I looked into that tiny face and felt no loss. I felt complete. Ethan found out about Silas's birth through an email from the attorney. He wasn't there. He wasn't allowed. The court granted me full custody but still approved supervised visitation for him. The first time Ethan showed up, he brought a wooden toy. A build-it-yourself giraffe. Silas slept through most of it. Ethan didn't know what to say. He sat in the chair, looked at the baby, then at me, and asked small-talk questions like, "Is he feeding okay? Are you sleeping at all? Who does he look like?" I answered politely, not cold, not warm. The second visit he was 20 minutes late. The visitation center logged it. Silas cried the entire time from the unfamiliarity. Ethan fumbled, and as he left he only said, "I'll get better at this." He never came back. I wasn't surprised. Some people love the idea of a role, father, husband, good person, but don't have the patience to live it day after day. I started teaching part-time again at a nearby private high school. Light schedule, mostly 11th and 12th grade literature. The students were curious about the faint scar on my arm. I told them it came from an unfortunate pumpkin carving accident. They burst out laughing. At noon, while Silas stayed with a trustworthy babysitter, I launched a small virtual counseling space. Video sessions, mainly for women navigating heartbreak, betrayal, or that strange sense of being lost after divorce. I never called myself an expert. I just said I was someone who knew what it felt like to wake up one day and no longer recognize your life. "What did you do first when you found out you were betrayed?" one client asked. I paused, then answered. I breathed. Just breathed in. Because if you forget that, you'll forget you're still alive. These women, lawyers, nurses, single moms, office workers, they had one thing in common. Each of them once thought pain was the final cut. But it's not. It's only the beginning of a different version of you. At night, I'd take Silas for walks around the lake. One evening he spotted a baby duck waddling after its mother, and burst into laughter, clapping his little hands. I knelt beside him, brushed his cheek gently. "Silas," I whispered, "everything I do isn't to fight anyone. I'm just learning to live honestly with myself." "So you grow up in truth, not in sugar-coated lies." He looked at me with those wide brown eyes, not understanding a thing. But I knew one day he would. And when that day came, I'd be ready to tell him everything. No bitterness, no resentment, just the truth. Enough to help him protect what's worth keeping. Everyone has their own threshold. Some choose forgiveness to keep a house intact. Some choose to let go to keep themselves whole. I don't think I'm stronger than anyone. I just know that at some point, silence stops being noble and becomes a betrayal of your own truth. My story doesn't have a dramatic finale, no blazing revenge, but I hope that somewhere out there, someone quietly walking through pain like I did, will feel less alone. What do you think of the path I chose? If it were you, would you forgive? Or would you walk away and start again, like I did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to hear them. And if you love stories about family, choices, and the journey of rediscovering yourself, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and keep walking with me through the stories to come, because sometimes the smallest, most honest things are the ones that make us stronger each day.